So it really starts off with saying, what is the big problem that we face in African agriculture? And if you look at the data, Africa is producing about 1 ton per hectare compared to Asia, which is about 3, and the US, which would be 8, 9, 10, way up there. So anything you can do to increase productivity of the land will have enormous implications in an era of rising demand for food and food prices. So we went back to a very small focus and said, well, what are the crops that we are particularly interested in? And got onto chickpea really at the request of the Prime Minister of Ethiopia, himself somebody who has a good training in agriculture and smallholder farmers, so, who understands the power of chickpea being a local crop, being a staple of everybody in the country every day, particularly important in a country where they have dietary practices where they fast 200 days a year, and fast means not having dairy and milk products. So a plant-based protein source is terribly important. And of course chickpea is a biofertilizer, that it enriches the soil through nitrogen fixation. All very positive. So the question was, how can you develop a local, but boost productivity locally so that it would be a spillover effect into the farming community of Ethiopia, but also do it so that there'd be a profit margin at the end of the day. Chickpea and a sustainable agricultural model. If that works, we think we can apply it in other settings. But it comes at a time when the company is starting to look more seriously at Africa more broadly. And we feel very strongly, and we heard comments today at CGI from the head of Barclays, who stressed that the future of African development is going to have to rest upon improving agriculture. If that's the case, and we would agree with that, then this kind of project where you've got private and public engagement, where you've got what we don't yet have on this, private and public finance at different points in the value chain being merged to achieve these social goals and profit goals, are the way to go. And that's the way we would hope, if we're going to expand fruit and vegetable production in Africa, if we're going to increase our use of ingredients sourced out of Africa, this same model we think has application. The crop then goes off into 3 directions conceptually. The one is into the World Food Programme's emergency relief feeding, a plum peanut type product where instead of using peanut we're using chickpea. We believe that the product, which is now being used in Pakistan under the Wawamam brand of World Food Programme, has a number of advantages over chickpea, over peanut. First, the nutritional criteria around it are better. Second, you can grow the plants in Ethiopia. And third, any of the IP developed intellectual property will be placed in the public domain, which we think will long-term keep the prices low. So that's the first stream. The second is to see whether we can build a local commercial manufacturing and consumer base for chickpea-related products, and their range of ideas there. And thirdly, we have a growing hummus business worldwide, in the US, but likely to expand in a number of countries. And already some of the sesame is already sourced out of Ethiopia. Ethiopia is the 3rd largest exporter of sesame in the world. It's their number 2 agricultural crop for export after coffee. And so it made sense to think of how could we also be providing export earnings to the government. All the projections on chickpea demand worldwide suggest that we are currently way below being able to supply what's needed. The biggest demand continues to be India and Pakistan, which are still the largest users by far and the largest growers. So they are currently, and obviously population growth, you know what it is, and GDP growth. And so we feel very comfortable that GDP growth is going to continue to fuel continued demand for chickpea in the current chickpea market. And that doesn't even take account of if we're successful and our competitors are successful in persuading people that hummus is a good brand and chickpea is a good product around the world, that demand will also have to be met. So I think that it'll actually boil down to, can the Ethiopian farmer produce a quality product that's competitive in terms of price and quality with others? And I don't see why they can't, given that they're already doing very well on coffee and sesame. We've seen that the success achieved in coffee came by focusing on broad-based empowerment of farmers, turning them into entrepreneurs as opposed to aid recipients. And that shift has immediately changes the way they work together. Suddenly they understand the benefit of sharing smallish areas and coming together to get scale. They understand the power of warehousing together and doing a lot of things together that normally would not be done if you were just focusing on your own smallholder subsistence farm. So I think that is the vision we have. How we plan to do it, we would hope to work out certainly with the Ethiopian authorities. And their involvement, it starts with the Prime Minister. It goes into the new Agricultural Transformation Agency headed by Khalid Bomba, who for many years was at the Gates Foundation involved in agriculture in Ethiopia, who returned to really spearhead the total transformation of agriculture in the country. Part of our program includes providing retiree support to the government as they start implementing a new agricultural process. And the kind of person who's giving that support is an operations expert, somebody who knows about basics of IT, the operational issues of transport and infrastructure and warehousing. And that person has already started working. His past work was in 30 countries across Africa, based out of our South Africa business. So this is a pretty deep commitment directly to the government. I would say that when we look at capacity building, I've always felt, being in the health field, that there tend to be far more projects, money going into project finance than they are going into capacity building. And capacity building at both the basic level in the field, but also at the higher levels. So what we've done also in the period of starting this grant is to give a planning grant to the University of Stellenbosch in Cape Town to their sustainable agriculture program to map out what are the needs in sustainable agriculture from an institutional and human capacity point of view that need to be met. And their instructions were to do that in close concert with Ethiopian agricultural folk and people from Nigeria. And so the three countries are working together. There already is an established relationship between the Prime Minister and some people in this faculty in South Africa, and he's drawn upon them for expertise in soil management, and they actually have had their first meeting. We'd hope this would lead on to them saying, this is the real needs of Africa in terms of sustainable agriculture and nutrition, and we would hope through our foundation this time, and through other foundations, to see whether we could provide the significant finance needed to upgrade science in the universities across Ethiopia and other African countries. Because I believe without that, you'll be dependent on a steady stream of people being imported into the country. How do you sell this in a tough business world of today, where the demand for short-term results often overrides those of long-term? Again, we heard the discussion in the panel earlier. And that's why it's going to be so important to show that there will be relatively short-term gains from a project like this. And even if you have to monetize the gains in terms of hunger reduction, which you can do, we need to turn this project into showing visible results early, because if we do, I think we'll be able to find other partners and others will want to go this route, and we believe it's the way to go. There are some shareholders who would focus on the immediate bottom line, the short-term focus. But the others, and I had the opportunity to speak to a group called 100 Women in Hedge Funds around environmental and sustainability investing. And they certainly get it. I mean, they understand that from a business point of view, we're lowering our risk because we're going to be very vulnerable to where we're going to get our food from in the future. And if we continue to rely on the current approach to suppliers, and they are increasingly dependent upon weather conditions and changing vagaries of weather, we may end up having some big shocks down the line. And this is actually building resilience into the system. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a mixed understanding. It's obviously, it's just been launched, so we haven't fully tested it. If we have a chance to go through the full logic and see that this is a modest start, if the relationships work, if the crop yields that we expect happen even within the next few months, I think we'll already be into quite a good place. And we would hope even by May next year, we'll be able to give some of the early results.